Welcome, dreamers, to the realm where time whispers its oldest secrets beneath the hush of stars. Tonight, we cast our gaze far across the Pacific to an island adrift in the breath of the ocean. Easter Island, known to its first inhabitants as Rapa Nui here. Towering stone giants and silent watch, carved from volcanic earth and mystery. Who gave them faces? Who sang them into being? And why do they still speak without ever moving their lips? Before we embark on this journey through time's veiled edges, if these ancient whispers resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle light, and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing to continue these nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow wanderer, from which corner of the earth you drift into tonight's meditation. Let the global chorus of dreamers gather once more across time zones and tides as we surrender to the slow unraveling of a forgotten past. Close your eyes, still your breath, and let us begin. Far beyond the well-traveled routes of the ancient Polynesian voyagers, past the farthest coral atolls and drifting cloud shadows, lies a place that should not be. It is a fragment of land isolated by more than 2,000 kilometers of endless ocean in every direction. A green hush floating atop the waves, surrounded by silence and the stars' reflection. This island was not always called Easter Island to those who first found it, who felt its volcanic soil between their toes and tasted the brine on the wind. It had a different name, Rapa Nui, a name spoken softly, like the rustle of palm fronds at dusk, a name that lived in chants and bone flutes, in dreams passed from canoe to canoe across 1,000 miles of moving sea. It is a land born of fire. 3 slumbering volcanoes gave it shape: Monga to the north, Ranokau to the south, and the steep slopes of Poik to the east. They rose from the seafloor long before any foot touched their flanks, their black bones now carpeted with green moss. They offered high places for the wind to speak and the sky to remember. Imagine approaching such a place for the first time. You are adrift in a double-hulled canoe, guided only by the stars, the ocean swells, and the teachings of ancestors. You are a navigator of silence and instinct. The sea has carried you for weeks, perhaps months, and food is running low. Then out of the mist, the faint silhouette of a new land appears. You don't know its size, you don't know what lives there, but you land because the stars have guided you well. This is how the island was found, not by accident, but by design, through the ancient art of wayfinding navigation without maps, using the movement of birds, the pool of the currents, and the shape of the waves as they rebound from distant coasts. The first settlers were not one. They were seekers of rhythm, drawn by the pulse of something deep and unknown. But why here? Why this place, so far from all others, so remote that it seems almost to float between the world of the living and the realm of forgotten things? Some believe the island was meant to remain undiscovered, that it was hidden by the gods of wind and stone, protected by distance and silence. And yet, here it is, a puzzle in the vastness, a question made of earth and obsidian. From the moment they arrived, the people of Rapa Nui became something new. They were no longer just Polynesians, they were island dwellers cut off from all they had known. Here, they would craft a civilization like no other, a world enclosed by waves, defined by stone, and ruled by sky. They built no cities of brick, no palaces of gold. Instead, they carved their legends into cliffs. They chiseled their prayers into the faces of giants. And they waited. Waited for what? We may never know. But the island remembers. In its winds, there is longing. In its earth, the silence of forgotten footsteps. And across its ridgelines and shores stand the watchers, Moai stew massive, unblinking. As we begin our journey across this haunted green stone in the ocean, let us carry one truth with us like a lantern in the fog. This island was never meant to be easy to find, but it was never truly lost. It was waiting for someone to ask the right questions, waiting for the wind to whisper its story once more. Close your eyes, feel the surf, smell the wet stone, let a Moai begin to speak. They stand in solemn silence, lined along ridges and valleys, their backs to the sea, their eyes forever cast inland. The Moai, over 900 of them colossal guardians hewn from stone, scattered like echoes across the island's memory. Their expressions are unreadable, neither warm nor stern, neither wrathful nor kind. They gaze with a depth that transcends time, as if looking not at the island, but through it, not at the people, but into the soul of something deeper, something buried. Ita Moai is a mystery made solid, towering up to 10 meters high and weighing as much as 80 tons. They were carved from the compressed volcanic ash of Rano Rarakutha, quarry of gods and ghosts. It is here that most Moai were born, shaped from the stone of the earth, as if the island itself was dreaming them into existence. Imagine the first chisel stroke, the first echo in the stone. The sculptor would begin with the head, working downward along the length of the body still embedded in the mountain's slope. Days would pass, then weeks, then months. A face would emerge, a nose, a solemn brow, the ghost of a smile that never formed. One by one, they were given form not identical, yet sharing a family likeness. They are not just statues. They are not merely art. The people of Rapa Nui believed the Moai held a sacred spiritual energy passed down from revered ancestors. These were not just monuments, but vessels, portals through which ancestral wisdom flowed, watching over clans and lands, guarding harvests, guiding dreams. Their eyes, once inlaid with gleaming coral and obsidian pupils, were the final piece. Only then would the Moai truly awaken. It was said that when the eyes were set into place, the spirit of the ancestor would descend and inhabit the stone. And so they stared, and still they stare. What did they see? They saw the rise and fall of forests, the stretch of canoe voyagers reaching ever farther. They saw the hands that carved them grow old and tremble. They saw the world change, palm trees vanish, waters grow still, silence settle over songs once sung in the open air. And yet, they did not fall. Most Moai face away from the sea. This detail has puzzled scholars for generations, but perhaps it is simple. Perhaps they did not face the ocean because they were not guardians against the unknown. They were protectors of the non-land, the people, the generations yet to be born. Some Moai do stand at the coast, watching the waves. These are different. They keep their vigil over the ocean as if waiting for something or someone to return. Perhaps they await the voyagers who never came back. Or perhaps they look beyond, toward the stars, remembering the way their people came. How were they moved? This question haunts the minds of explorers, archaeologists, and dreamers alike. These statues, some taller than a house and heavier than an elephant, were carved far from where they now stand. There were no wheels, no draft animals, only ropes, logs, and determination. And yet, they moved. There are whispers that the Moai walked, not in the way you and I walk about with rhythm and sway, rocked side to side like a child's toy or a slow, solemn dance, with ropes tied like a puppet's strings. Groups of islanders may have tilted them forward, shifting them across the land as if the earth itself carried them with reverence. Walking stones, marching ancestors, an island alive with movement. But some tales go deeper still. It is said that the priests once knew words that could command the stone to rise, that ancient chants, now forgotten, held the power to call forth spirits from the mountain and give the statues legs, that during sacred nights when the moon was low and the stars bright, the Moai danced silently across the land, choosing their places, guided by ancestral breath. It is myth, yes. But then again, what is myth, if not memory in disguise? Even now, when the sun sinks low and fog drapes the hills, the Moai seem almost to shift. The air around them thickens. The silence deepens. They do not move, but something moves through them, something vast, something watching, and you, lying here, listening beneath the hush of sleep, you are seen by them now. Do not be afraid. They do not judge. They only remember. And in remembering, they keep the island alive. Breathe slowly, let your thoughts still. Their gaze holds no harm, only knowing. Let us now journey eastward, toward the ancient womb from which the Moai emerged, a sleeping crater, hollowed by time. Its steep walls rise around a grassy bowl that once held a freshwater lake, reflecting the moon and stars. This is no ordinary quarry. It is a sacred forge, a breathing stone cathedral. From afar, the slopes of Rano Raraku seem quiet, still, but as one draws near, one finds giants half buried, frozen in the act of becoming. More than 400 Moai remain here, in various stages of creation, some upright, some lying prone, others still fused to the volcanic bedrock from which they were born. They are the unfinished dreams of a civilization whose hands grew weary, whose memories faded before the last song was sung. Each Moai here tells a different story, a face that never received its eyes, a body that was carved but never raised, a figure that leaned too far forward and cracked before it could be freed. They are the echoes of ambition and reverence, halted mid, and in their silence, they speak of more than success. They speak of devotion. For generations, the people of Rapa Nui returned to Rano Raraku. It was a place of pilgrimage, of ritual, of transformation. The stone itself was sacred, and within it, the ancestors were waiting to be released. Carvers worked under the sun and the drifting clouds, their chants rising in rhythm with each strike of the toki stone tool shaped from basalt. The process was slow. A single Moai could take a year or more to complete. But time, here, was not measured in days. It was measured in meaning. Each strike of the chisel was a prayer, a thread in the tapestry of lineage and belonging. Close your eyes and imagine the sound. Tap, pause, chant, tap again. A community working not with haste, but with reverence. There was a pattern in the creation. First, the front was carved the face, the long ears, the arms folded over a slender torso. Then the statue would be detached from the rock and raised into a standing pit nearby, where final details were added, and eyes ready to be opened. Then, the journey began out of the crater and across the land, to a sacred platform on Ahu, where the Moai would take its place among the watchers. But not all made it. Some statues remained forever trapped on the slope, face down in the earth, as if sleeping. Others cracked during transport or were abandoned along the path. Some still lie just outside the crater, as if hesitating to leave. Why did they stop carving? The answers, like the stone itself, are layered and complex. Some say deforestation depleted the island's ability to support such labor. Others speak of rival clans, of warfare and dwindling resources. But there is another possibility, one less practical, more haunting. Perhaps the people stopped not because they were defeated, but because they had said all they needed to say. Perhaps the Moai had served their purpose, had carried the spirits of the ancestors to every corner of the land. Perhaps the silence that followed was not collapse, but transformation, a turning inward, a quieting of the stone. For even now, the quarry lives. When mist gathers in the crater and rain darkens the earth, it is said you can still feel the breath of the ancients in the air. The grass seems to hold its breath. The unfinished faces, weathered by time, gaze not at you, but through you. There are no voices in Rapa Nui. You stand among giants, but you are not alone. The ancestors are here, not as ghosts but as presence, as weight, as witness. And if you listen closely, you may hear the final words carved into the hillside, words too sacred for sound, too old for translation. Sleep. Now, dreamer, you are standing in a cathedral of forgotten gods. Let their silence hold you, and when you are ready, we will walk together to the next mystery. Across the coastlines and hills of Rapa Nui, you will find stone platforms, flat, weathered, and seemingly humble. But these are no ordinary foundations. These are the Ahu, sacred altars upon which the Moai once stood in solemn procession. Without them, the statues were incomplete. Without them, the voices of the ancestors could not rise. Ahu are more than bases, they are bridges between realms, between earth and sky, between the living and the dead, between the seen and the unseen. Each Ahu was crafted with intention, built from stacked stones, some massive and precisely fitted, others smaller and shaped by time. They formed elongated platforms that stretched along the ground like fallen shadows. On these platforms, the Moai were raised sometime as one, sometimes a row of 7 or more each, carved to honor a specific ancestor, each aligned with care. Some Ohu face inland, watching over the settlements and gardens of the people. Others line the coasts, standing guard before the ocean's breath. But all were constructed to hold mana, to receive and channel the sacred energy that flowed through the Moai, down into the earth, and out into the lives of the people. Imagine standing before an Ahu at twilight, the stone warm from the day's sun. The Moai above you, tall and still, their expressions unreadable. The sea at your back, whispering its eternal chant. And behind the platform a sloped ramp of stones, where offerings were once placed, fires kindled, and prayers sung. It was here that rituals were held, births and deaths, healings and harvests. It was here the priest would speak not just to the people, but to the spirits. And it was here perhaps where the ancestors listened. Some Ahu held more than stone. Beneath the platforms, archaeologists have discovered human remains, burials sealed in stone. Chiefs, priests, elders, laid to rest beneath a towering Moai, as if protected forever by the watchful gaze. The most sacred Ahu, Ahu Tangariki, stands like a silent army against the eastern shore. 15 Moai stand shoulder to shoulder, some towering nearly 10 meters high. Behind them rises the curve of the hills. Before them, the ocean stretches endlessly. They are the largest Moai ever erected, guardians of wind and time. But they did not always stand. In centuries past, the Ahu fell into ruin. Earthquakes toppled the Moai, wars between clans brought them down, and slowly they were buried by time. It was not until modern times that some were raised again, restored stone by stone. But the power of an Ahu is not in its perfection. Even those that lie in ruin still hold presence. The stones remember. The spirits remain. There is a silence that gathers around an Ahu, a sacred hush, like the breath before a chant begins. To walk among them is not to walk among ruins. It is to step into a space between moments where the past is not gone, but listening. Some nights, when the wind turns and the stars shimmer low, it is said the air around the Ahu grows thick with unseen energy. The Moai seem to glow, not with light but with memory, with reverence. You, the dreamer, lying beneath the veil of sleep. You too are standing upon an Ahu now, not with your feet, but with your thoughts. Let your breath settle. Let the weight of time hold you gently. You are part of the circle now. There is no need to speak. The Moai understand. The stones understand. Your silence is enough. In the next chapter, we shall journey into the shadows of change, when balance was lost and the age of Moai began to end. There comes a moment in every civilization when the whispers begin to fade. Not all at once, not with thunder or war drums, but slowly, like mist lifting from the hills at dawn. It is not a forgetting of facts, but of rhythm. The rhythm that once guided the stonecover's hands, the navigator's stars, the priest's chants. On Rapa Nui, this forgetting came not as punishment, but as drift from harmony, from the songs of ancestors, from the pact between earth and spirit. The Moai still stood proud and watchful, but the people were changing. Forests that once stretched across the island grew thin. Palm trees, once tall and swaying, began to vanish. The soil, worked too hard, yielded less. The canoes, which had once traveled far across the sea, became scarce. Some say the people used the trees to move the Moai, rolling them on logs or building sleds. Others believe the forests were cleared for farming, for firewood, for fuel. But it is not the cutting alone that mattered, it was the forgetting of balance. The island, small and enclosed, could offer only so much. And once the rhythm was broken, the balance unraveled. Still, the people endured. They adapted. New customs arose. Gardens were built in stone-lined pits to shield them from wind. Chicken houses of rock, shaped like boats, were scattered across the land. The old ways bent but did not break. But the Moai no longer rose. The quarry of Ranararaku fell silent. Half-finished giants remained sleeping on the slopes. The ahu began to crumble. The statues that once stood tall began to fall, some by storm, some by quake, some perhaps by human hands. Why were they toppled? Some whisper of clan rivalries of once united tribes divided by scarcity and need. The Moai, once symbols of unity and lineage, became trophies. One clan's guardian was another's target. With each fallen statue, mana was believed to be weakened. With each collapse, one lineage claimed dominance over another. Others say the people felt abandoned, that when the rains no longer came and crops withered, the ancestors were silent. And in that silence, frustration bloomed. And yet, perhaps it was simpler. Perhaps the people did not topple their Moai out of anger but out of sorrow. Perhaps it was a ritual of closure, laying down the past with reverence, letting stone return to the earth. Not an act of violence, but of mourning. Still, the forgetting deepened. Languages shifted. The chants grew shorter. The meanings of old glyphs carved into wooden tablets called rongorongo slipped beyond memory. Those who held the knowledge aged, and as they passed, so too did the stories. Even the name Rapa Nui may not have been the island's first. Some say it was once called Te Pito o Te Henyutha, navel of the world, a place not merely remote, but central, a spiritual umbilicus connecting heaven, earth, and the great ocean in between. But names drifted too. The Moai stood still, but around them, the world moved on. And yet, even in forgetting, something remained. The people still told stories, still fished, still danced and carved and lived. They began new traditions, the Birdman cult, a sacred competition to retrieve the first egg from an offshore islet. A new god emerged, Meg, a face of creation and fertility. Rituals shifted, but the spirit endured. Change is not the end. It is a tide, and even as the age of the Moai waned, the soul of the island did not die. It simply changed shape. And now, as you lie in quiet reflection, drifting through the shadows of this long forgetting, consider this. Even when we forget, the land remembers. Even when the chants fall silent, the wind carries their rhythm. The Moai are not ashamed of what followed. They do not mourn their fallen kin. They simply wait, not for restoration, not for vengeance. They wait for understanding. They wait for listening. And you, dear dreamer, you are listening now. Let us walk on into the twilight of contact. The ocean, for so long a cradle of isolation, began to shimmer with unfamiliar shapes. White sails on the horizon, dark silhouettes of vessels with creaking timbers and voices that spoke no known tongue. The stillness of Rapa Nui was pierced not with violence, but with curiosity. The first recorded encounter came on an Easter Sunday. In the year 1722, a Dutch navigator named Jacob Roggeveen approached the island's shores, and so the name Easter Island was born not from the island's spirit, but from the calendar of a foreign tongue. A new name, like a robe placed upon a statue already dressed. From the sea, the island seemed a miracle, its steep cliffs rising from the waves, its statues dotting the hills like ancient sentinels. To the newcomers, it was astonishing. How could such a remote island hold such grandeur? Who built these Moai, and how? But to the people of Rapa Nui, the ships were less miraculous and more uncertain. These were not their ancestors returning in birdship or dream. These were strangers, pale, tall, clothed in medals and musketry. They came not by stars or swell, but by compass and conquest. Still, the first meeting was not one of swords. It was tentative, a dance of gifts and gestures, of exchanged fruits and puzzled glances. The islanders emerged cautiously, offering yams and curiosity. The Dutch returned with beads and questions, but something beneath the surface began to stir a slow awakening of imbalance. The visitors did not stay long. They left behind stories, sketches, and speculation. But others followed. More ships, more boots upon soil, more names etched onto maps where no names had belonged before. Over the next century, Rapa Nui became a waypoint for explorers and whalers, missionaries and merchants. Each arrival brought new words, new desires, and new disruptions. And with each, the silence of the Moai deepened. Some visitors were kind, others were not. Diseases arrived that no chant could repel. Crops were trampled, sacred sites disturbed. The delicate balance between people and land, already frayed, now stretched thin. In time, Peruvian slavers came not for stories, but they stole away hundreds, including priests and elders, tearing threads from the cultural tapestry that held memory and myth together. And yet, the island endured. The Moai watched as ships came and went, as languages shifted and traditions were Some Moai fell during this time, not toppled by hands of war, but by the slow erosion of meaning, the chisel of sorrow. But not all was lost. New alliances formed, survivors adapted. A few voices remembered the old ways, holding them in secret songs and gestures, passing them like embers through the night. The Birdman cult rose in this time, like a flame in the dusk. Its rites, held at the sacred village of Arango atop the cliffs of Rano Kau, were vibrant and mysterious. It was a religion of renewal, of flight, of courage, a sign that belief had not died, only changed its feathers. Yet through it all, the Moai remained silent, steadfast and toppled, some buried, but never truly gone. They had seen ships before, canoes with sails, starlit voyagers from other islands, but this was different. The ocean was no longer a path, it had become a gate, and from that gate, the modern world poured in. Still, even as new rulers arrived, as maps were redrawn and flags planted, there was a quiet resistance in the stone. The Moai would not speak the language of empire. They would not bow to flags or cannons. They simply remained. And now, you, dreamer, sail your own ship through memory, a silent vessel drifting on breath, not wind. The ships that came changed much, but not everything. Some things, carved into stone and soil, endure far beyond the reach of anchor or gunpowder. The Moai are listening, not to the ships, but to you. Once, the Moai had eyes, not hollow sockets or blank stone, no. They had eyes of coral and obsidian, crafted with care, set into the carved sockets as the final, sacred gesture. Eyes that shimmered like moonlight on black water. Eyes that did not merely look, but saw. To the people of Rapa Nui, it was only when the eyes were placed that a Moai became complete. Before that, it was only a body of form, awaiting breath. But with the eyes came the manna. With the eyes came the presence. The eyes were windows, not just to the world, but to the heavens. They connected each Moai with the spirits above and the hearts below. They were beacons, watching not only over the land, but through time itself. Why were the Moai made to look upward, not toward one another? Because they were meant to see the stars. Rapa Nui's people were astronomers in rhythm, not in chart. They watched the heavens like a sailor watches the sea. The tilt of the moon, the shimmer of Venus, the dance of constellations above the waves. These were not curiosities, but necessities. The Moai, too, may have been aligned with celestial bodies. Some researchers believe their placements correspond to solstitices and star paths, that the ancients carved these giants not merely to honor ancestors, but to mark time, to record memory in the language of light and shadow. When the solstice sun rose between two Moai, it was more than dawn. It was a ritual, prophecy, alignment. It was as if the statues drank light through their coral pupils, sending it down through the ahu and into the island's pulse. Others say the Moai watched for returning souls, voyagers of the spirit, crossing back from the great beyond, guided by starlight and remembered songs. The eyes, gleaming in the night, might have served as lighthouses for ancestral return. But time and wind wore the Moai down. Their eyes, made of delicate materials, fell or were taken. Many were lost to history, scattered beneath earth and ruin. Without their eyes, the Moai seemed to slumber once more, silence, sightless, yet never unaware. Still, some eyes remain in museums, behind glass, fragments of coral and dark stone whisper of vision. In excavations near Oahu, pieces are uncovered, shaped, rounded, unmistakably intended for faces long silent. In dreams, too, they appear, those luminous eyes, glowing against twilight cliffs. You may wonder what it was like to stand before a Moai with eyes. Imagine the feeling, that vast face above you, carved not with anger but with ancient calm. Those wide, gleaming orbs gazing down not at your form, but into your being. There is no fear in such a gaze, only reflection. Though Moai do not jet, they witness, they absorb. They are not gods, but vessels of memory. And perhaps in the dark some still see. Perhaps, when clouds move across the moon just right, or when the winds hush and stars appear, the Moai open unseen eyes once more, not physical, but spiritual, eyes that gaze through time, through silence, into the quiet spaces between thoughts. As you rest now, as your body grows still and your breath becomes soft, know this, you are being seen, not with scrutiny, but with ancient kindness, not with questions, but with understanding. The Moai, even blind, are never truly blind. They see through history's mist. They see through dream. Let us step deeper into the shadows of knowing. Above the southern shore of Rapa Nui rises Rano Kau, a vast volcanic crater, whose inner walls cradle a lake still and silent like a forgotten mirror. Its rim curves along the sky like the edge of a great bowl, and at its edge rests Orongo, a ceremonial village made of stone and myth. Here, at the edge of the world, wind meets memory. And it is here that a new rhythm once took root, a religion born not of statues, but of flight, not of Moai, but of birds. After the age of the Moai began to wane, as old chants softened and the people turned toward other dreams, a new tradition emerged. It did not erase what came before, but built upon it, like new vines twining over ancient roots. This was the cult of the birdman Tangata Manu. It was not a religion of idol worship, but of ritual competition. Each year, the clans of the island would gather at Orongo, where stone houses shaped like canoes clustered against the crater's edge. They would wait for the arrival of the Sooty-Turn, the sacred Manutera that nested on the tiny islets offshore. From among the clans, a champion would be chosen. Young, agile, fearless. When the birds arrived, the champion, guided by the blessing of a priest and representing his patron chief, would descend the cliffs of Ranokau steep, jagged, whispering danger, and swim across the churning sea to the islet of Motunui. He would wait among the rocks and cries of seabirds, watching the skies, watching the waves, watching the days pass. Then when the first egg was laid, he would take it carefully, reverently, tuck it into a pouch tied to his brow, like a crown of fragility and fate. Then the journey reversed. He would swim back, climb the cliffs again, wounded sometimes, trembling always, and present the egg intact. If he succeeded, his chief would be declared the new birdman, the Tangata Manu. For a year, that chief would hold sacred power, blessed, secluded, and feared. It was not just a contest. It was a ritual reenactment of creation, of endurance, of connection between human and sky. Why birds? Because they flew where the Moai could not. Because they arrived from the heavens and nested in the earth. Because they knew the stars not by story, but by wing. To win the competition was to prove closeness to the divine, to show that one could move between realms. The birdman was shaven, painted red, clothed in tapa bark. He lived apart, in solitude, in trance. He did not govern as a king, but radiated as a vessel of mana. The walls of Orongo are covered in petroglyphs of birdman, half man, half rigobird, arms curved like wings, heads bent in eternal prayer. Some are carved with eyes open, some are headless. All are watching. As the rituals continued year after year, the cliffs themselves became sacred, no longer mere stone, but thresholds between breath and sky. Even now, the wind that sweeps across Ranokau carries more than air. It carries voices. It carries the cries of the seabirds and the footfalls of the brave. The rocks remember their names. The birdman cult lasted for generations, perhaps 2 centuries or more. It faded only with the coming of missionaries, who saw in it heathenry, not holiness. The last ceremony was held in the 1800s. After that, the eggs were left unclaimed. The chants were no longer sung, but the cliffs still wait. And sometimes, when the Manutera returns in spring, circling above the island, it is said the spirit of the ritual stirs again. The waves hush, the wind bends, and in the hush of twilight, one might hear footsteps, bare feet against stone, climbing the cliffside toward something sacred. You, dear dreamer, feel this now. Not the risk, not the climb, but the reverence, the pull between earth and sky, the memory of flight, even with feet planted in soil. Let your breath soften. Let your thoughts float like seabirds above the waves. You are not on the cliff, but you are in the story. Among the great riddles of Rapa Nui, there lies a secret not carved in stone, but etched in wood, curved, flowing, precise, symbols like waves, birds, spirals, and shapes that resemble both human and animal, language and dream. These markings appear on long, flat wooden boards called rongo, and they whisper a question that is yet to be answered. What do they say? Rongo is not just a mystery of Easter Island, it is one of the great unsolved scripts of the ancient world. No other Polynesian culture is known to have developed a written language, and yet, here on this isolated island adrift in the Pacific, symbols emerged, complex, structured, repeated with intention. Where did they come from? Some believe the script was invented after the arrival of Europeans, inspired by the sight of writing on paper and parchment. But others, more suggest the symbols are older, born of starlight and sea chant, passed from priest to priest in times when the ancestors still spoke through trees and flame. The surviving tablets are few. Most are gone, burned by missionaries, forgotten in caves, or lost 2 times hunger. Only a couple dozen remain today, scattered in museums around the world. In Santiago, in London, in St. Petersburg, their wood is dark and worn, their curves delicate, their stories locked behind silence. The writing follows a unique path, known as reverse boustrophedon. One line is read left to right, the next right to left. The symbols themselves are flipped accordingly, as if reflecting a deeper rhythm, like paddling through tides that shift with each stroke. There are patterns, repetitions, and groupings, but no one has broken the code. Many have tried. Linguists, cryptographers, dreamers, they've counted symbols, mapped recurrences, compared motifs to known Polynesian languages, but without a Rosetta Stone, no translation survives. There is no key, no thread to pull. The meanings remain hidden, like fish beneath a moonless tide. Some believe the tablets record genealogies. Others think they are chants, prayers, calendars, or even myth stories of creation and loss. There are theories that they recount the rise of the Moai, or the rituals of the Birdman cult. Or perhaps they record something we've not yet imagined. What if Rongo Rongo was not meant to be read by the eyes, but by the spirit? What if the symbols were sung, not spoken? What if they were not language in the way we understand it, but maps of vibration, mnemonic devices woven with breath? There is a story of a woman and elder who once held a memory of the script. She traced the symbols with her finger and whispered, "I know this, my grandfather sang it." But the song was lost, and so the meaning passed like smoke between fingers. Even the word Rongo Rongo carries mystery. It may derive from a root meaning to chant, or to recite, not to write. Perhaps these were not books, but voices carved into wood. And now, here you are, a dreamer in the stillness, listening not with the mind, but with the breath. Can you hear the shapes? Can you feel the rhythm in your pulse? What if you are reading Rongo Rongo now not with your eyes, but with your sleep-soft heart? The tablets do not demand translation. They offer a mirror. Each symbol is a door, and behind each door, a question. And what greater wisdom is there than to ask questions no one can yet answer? Rest now in the hush between symbols. Float in the silence between meanings. Even unread, the script remains alive. Once, the island was green, not just with grass and scrub, but with towering palms that swayed like guardians in the wind. Giant trees stretched their fronds toward the sky, their trunks wide and strong. The hills of Rapa Nui wore a cloak of forest, and the earth hummed with rooted life. This forest is gone. Now, the island is mostly bare. Wind sweeps across its ridges, unbroken by canopy. Rain slides over exposed soil. The hills echo with an emptiness that feels too recent, too raw, as though the trees are only sleeping beneath the grass, waiting for someone to remember their names. What happened to the forest? It is one of the great questions whispered by scholars and spirits alike. And like all the island's mysteries, the answer drifts between fact and fable. Some say the forest fell to the hands of its own people, that in the height of the Moai era, trees were cut to move the statues used as rollers, sleds, or scaffolds, that as the people carved more giants and pulled them across the land, the trees gave way, one by one, never replaced, never reprieved. Others say it was farming fields of yams, taro, and sugarcane needing sun, needing space, or that the people burned the trees for firewood, for warmth, for cooking, for clearing. Small acts multiplied across generations until the canopy dissolved like mist. There are those who point to the arrival of rats, Polynesian stowaways that devoured seeds, halting the forest's renewal from below. And others still, the dreamers, whisper something deeper, that the trees were not merely plants, but spirits. And when the old ways faded, when the chance of planting and harvest ceased, the trees departed, walking back into the earth, one root at a time. There is evidence of what once grew here. Scientists have found pollen buried deep in sediment, fossilized seeds, impressions of vanished palm. The species has a name now, Pachalococcus dispapta, the Easter Island palm, a relative of the Chilean wine palm, once reaching 30 meters in height. They stood for thousands of years, and then, within just a few centuries, they vanished. What was lost with the forest? Not just shade, not just wood. The trees held soil. Without them, the earth began to erode. Rain carried away nutrients. Crops struggled. Water became harder to find. Canoes, once built from thick trunks, could no longer be made. The people, bound by sea and silence, grew more isolated still. But it was more than ecology. The forest was woven into belief. There is an old story, told in breath and hush, of spirits that dwelt in the trees, not as gods, but as watchers, forest eyes that kept the island in balance. When the last tree fell, those eyes closed, and the winds changed. Yet the people endured. They adapted. They dug gardens deep into the soil. They wove thatch from reeds. They raised chickens in stone pens. Even without the forest, they remembered how to survive. Still, the memory lingers. Even now, as you walk the island in your imagination, the absence is palpable. The hills feel open to open, the shadows too short, the sky too wide, the silence too large. You might feel, beneath your feet, the longing of roots, the breath of seeds that never open, the ghosts of leaves brushing against air that no longer holds them. But listen closely. The island is not angry. It does not mourn in bitterness. It mourns in stillness. The forest is not lost, it is remembered. And perhaps, in dreams like yours, it begins to return. So breathe deep, dreamer. Let the wind carry you through groves that no longer stand but still live in memory. Let your thoughts rustle like leaves once did. In a language older than sound, they are giants of stone, born from the earth, shaped by memory, and placed across the island with sacred precision. But how did they move? This question, like the whisper of surf against black rock, returns again and again. The Moai are heavy, some as much as 80 tons, carved miles away from where they now stand. There were no carts, no wheels, no draft animals, only human hands, stone tools, and the will of ancestors. And yet, they moved. There are many theories, and they echo like footsteps. Some say the Moai were hauled on wooden sleds, over logs used as rollers. Others imagine ropes tied tightly around their heads and torsos, men pulling in rhythmic unison while chants filled the air. Still others propose paths of stone and sand, greased with oil or seaweed, to ease the burden of mass. But there is another tale. The elders of Rapa Nui once spoke of it without hesitation. The Moai walked, not metaphorically, not as a clever phrase, but truly they walked, upright, balanced, rocked from side to side, in slow, deliberate rhythm. Not alive, no, but guided. Moved like a standing body, swaying with momentum and will, guided by ropes and chants and ancestral breath. Imagine it now. Dozens of people, barefoot and solemn, holding ropes tied around a towering statue. Each group pulling in turn left, then right, then left again. The Moai rocks forward, step by step, like a dance, its base curved to allow the motion, its face tilted slightly upward, as though seeking stars. The ground trembles, dust lifts, drums pulse, and the great stone glides. It is not impossible. In recent years, a team constructed a replica, fitted ropes around its body, and with enough hands pulling in harmony, the statue indeed walked, awkwardly, slowly, but undeniably. The rhythm made movement. Perhaps the people of Rapa Nui needed no miracles, only rhythm, only belief, only the shared breath of a community so attuned to the land, the stars, and the stone that the impossible became sacred tradition. But why make them walk? Because walking is life. To place a Moai lying down would be a burial, but to raise it upright, to walk it to its ahu, to give it eyes, this was a resurrection, a return, an arrival. The ancestor had come home, and perhaps walking was part of the ritual, not just a way to transport, but a way to awaken. The movement itself may have imbued the Moai with mana, the chanting, the coordination, the energy of many souls aligned toward a single purpose. This was not labor, it was devotion. To walk the Moai was to participate in a sacred act of choreography of memory, and when a statue reached its platform, it stood not as an object, but as a presence. The face gazed over the village not to dominate, but to protect, to remind, to anchor. Now, in your resting thoughts, picture the procession. The sun is low. The grass glows gold. A line of figures moves across the land, silent, deliberate, reverent. In their midst, a Moai sways like a giant in meditation, each step guided by chant, each movement alive with belief. Not because they had to, but because they were meant to. And now, centuries later, though their steps are done, their journey continues through our questions, our AW and our dreams. You too are walking now, not across stone, but through memory, through breath, through the corridors of mystery. Let your body be still. Let your mind glide gently. What is a name? It is more than a label, it is a vessel. A name holds breath, memory, identity, and dream. It echoes across generations, not just to identify but to connect. And Rapa Nui, this sacred island adrift in the vastness, has carried many names, each shaped by the lips of a different time. To most of the world, it is known as Easter Island, a name born not of its own spirit, but of timing. On Easter Sunday, 1722, the Dutch explorer Jacob Ragaveen set eyes upon its green hills and towering statues. He marked the date. The sacred calendar of the church inscribed itself upon volcanic stone. But the people of the island knew a different name. They called it Rapa Nui. The name Rapa means the oar, or the paddle, and Nui means great. Together grew to Rapa. It was a name given later, perhaps in remembrance of another island, Rapa it, the Little Rapa, in the Austral archipelago. Some suggest the name Rapa Nui emerged when islanders, taken by slavers to distant shores, spoke of their homeland to others who could not place it on maps. But this is not the only name whispered by wind and wave. There is another, older, softer, Tepido o Tehenu, or the navel of the world. Such a name is not claimed lightly. To call a place the navel of the world is to declare it sacred. Not just a location, but a center of place where the threads of existence gather and twist into a knot of meaning. A place where heaven and earth touch, where ancestors walk without shadow, where memory flows like water from the roots of being. This name still echoes across the island, in story and stone. Near the northern shore, there lies a smooth, round boulder, the sacred navel stone. It rests within a ring of smaller rocks, set in careful symmetry. Locals say it marks the heart of the island's mana, the very pulse of its spiritual power. The stone is magnetic, some say, others claim it warms to the touch. Still others come simply to sit beside it and listen. It is a quiet stone, but it speaks to those who wait. Another name the island wears is Mata Kite Rangi, eyes that look to the sky. Here again, we find not a name of geography, but of spirit. For Rapa Nui has always been a place of watching, of witnessing, of skyward gaze. The Moai face the heavens. The ancestors sleep beneath stars. The people built their world in dialogue with the celestial dome above. There are names we will never know, names spoken in dialects now lost, in songs that vanished with the wind, in glances between priest and apprentice long faded from breath. The names the children gave the waves, or that carvers whispered to the stone before chiseling the first line. Each name is a layer. Each one adds texture to the soul of the island. And you, dear dreamer, floating now on the tides of thought, are part of that layering. What name do you give the place you visit in your mind? Is it Easter Island? Is it Rapa Nui? Is it Chipito Oceanua? Or is it something else, something older than sound? A shape behind your closed eyelids, a feeling beneath your ribs. Names are not fixed. They are fluid, like the sea, and the island does not mind what you call it. So long as you listen, so long as you remember. The island is made of stone, not just the towering Moai, but the very bones beneath your feet. Volcanic rock, born in fire, cooled by time, basalt, tough, and obsidian scattered like fragments of ancient thought. Everywhere you walk upon memory hardened into earth. But some stones speak, not in words, not in echoes, but in presence. Scattered across Rapa Nui are stones unlike the others, shaped by hands yet unmarked by inscription, aligned with stars, yet absent of symbol. They are the silent elders of the island monoliths and alignments, stone circles and platforms whose purpose drifts just beyond certainty. They are known to archaeologists as features, but to the soul, they are echoes. There are the navel stones, smooth and spherical, resting in rings, said to pulse with energy. They draw pilgrims from all corners of the earth. Some press their palms upon the warm surfaces and claim to feel the heartbeat of the land. Others say the stones hum faintly, as if dreaming. There are observatory stones, aligned with solstices and equinoxes, arranged in patterns too deliberate to be accidental. Some are carved with indentations that mark the rising and setting of celestial bodies. When the sun strikes just right, shadows fall along their edges like hands of light tracing ancient time. These stones, untouched by writing, record not stories but rhythms. They measure the breath of the sky. Then there are the toppled Moai, half buried in soil, reclaimed by grass and silence. They, too, speak, not of triumph, but of humility, not of power, but of change. Their fall is not failure, it is continuation. The fallen statues are as sacred as a standing, for in their quiet descent, they remind us, even the mighty rest. Even stone returns to sleep. At Orongo among the birdman houses are rocks engraved with countless petroglyphs, curved shapes, winged figures, spirals, and masks, some carved into cliff faces, some into loose stones now held in shadowed rooms. No two are quite the same, yet all seem part of one great breath carved, not in haste, but in reverence. These glyphs speak of the sea, the birds, the ancestors, and the stars, but they also speak of listening, of pausing, of learning to hear the silence between tides. You may ask, how does stone speak? And the answer is, not in language, but in invitation. It invites stillness. It invites presence. To sit beside one of these stones, especially at dusk, is to feel time stretch. The wind slows. The sky leans closer. And the stone, though unmoving, seems to become aware of you as if your breath stirs its surface. It does not judge. It does not instruct. It simply is. And in that being, it awakens the stillness within you. You, dear dreamer, lying now in the soft dark of contemplation, are not so different from these stones. You, too, hold memory. You, too, are shaped by time. You, too, rest while the sky turns overhead. Let the stones speak to you now, not with meaning, not with words, but with being. Let their presence anchor you. Let your breath become their silence. And as we drift onward, we shall enter the next chamber of history's hush. Before the Moai were carved, before the birds were worshipped, before even the first canoe touched the black shores of Rapa Nui, there were gods. Not gods of wrath or dominion, but gods of breath, sea foam, firelight, and sky. Gods whispered into being by starlit chants and the rhythm of the waves. Gods not bound to form, but flowing through every crevice of the land, every pulse of wind, every shimmer on the ocean's skin. And now they are almost forgotten, but not lost. Among the names that remain is make the most prominent of the island's deities. He was the god of creation, fertility, and the new world. The god of the birdman cult. Yes, but perhaps older still, woven into the island's bones before the first Moai rose from stone. Make is often carved as a face, wide-eyed and stylized, his mouth set in a mysterious curve. On cliffs and stones his likeness repeats again and again, etched by hands that remembered his name long after others faded. He is associated with the egg, with the sky, with rebirth, a god who watches, who renews, who seeds the island with possibility. His presence lingers in stories, in rock carvings, in the breath of the cliffs where the birds return each spring. But there were others two gods whose names are only fragments now. There was Hawa, the companion of Makemake. Some say she was a goddess of fertility and protection, guarding the egg-laying seabirds and watching over the sacred islets. Others say she was the keeper of secrets, the breath between chants. There were spirits of the sea and stone, of rain and flame, spirits that lived in caves and trees, in the very air between leaf and shadow. Some wore the faces of animals, others came in dreams, offering guidance or warning. The Rapa Nui pantheon was not written, it was remembered, passed from mouth to mouth, across the hush of generations. But when the missionaries came, the gods were silenced, the chants ceased, the carvings were buried or the people were told to forget, and many did, out of necessity, out of survival. But some memories lingered in the bones of stories, in lullabies, in secret names whispered to infants at night, in dreams. The gods were never jealous, never wrathful at their fading. They simply receded like the tide, like mist waiting. Even now, they are here, in the taste of the salt air, in the sound of wind sliding across stone, in the way the clouds cast moving shadows on the ridges at dusk. To remember them is not to recite doctrine. It is to feel, to sit by a carved rock and feel the hair rise on your arms, not from fear, but recognition. To walk through a cave and hear nothing, yet sense presence. To hear a seabird cry and feel your heart answer, without knowing why. These are the gods of Rapa Nui, not throned in clouds, but dwelling in stillness. They do not demand, they do not punish. They wait. And when we grow quiet enough, they speak. Now, dreamer, in the hush of your thoughts, in the slow rhythm of your breath, perhaps you feel them, not above you, but around you, not as visions, but as silence that shimmers. You are not alone. You are never alone. Let us carry this stillness forward, beneath the green hills and volcanic ridges of Rapa Nui, beneath the roots of vanished forests and the feet of the Moai. The island breathes inward. It does so through its caves. These are not mere hollows in stone, but sacred chambers of memory formed by ancient lava flows that once scorched the surface, then cooled into hidden veins of earth. Winding passages, narrow tunnels, secret openings. The island is honeycombed with them, a shadow world beneath the surface. And in these quiet depths, the past rests. The Rapa Nui people knew these caves well. They did not fear them. They lived with them. In times of storm, they sheltered within. In times of famine, they stored food in their cool, protected walls. In times of ritual, they came with reverence, bearing stories, songs, and offerings. Some caves were homes, others were temples, some were tombs, and some were something more. One such cave lies near the sea. Anakai Tangata, it is called the Cave of the Man-Eaters. It is a name given much later, heavy with myth and misinterpretation. What matters more are the paintings on its ceiling, crimson and ochre birds, painted in careful strokes, their wings forever in mid-flight. Frigate birds, some say, sacred to the birdman cult. They float across the stone, their curved beaks and wide wings echoing the shape of prayers. Beneath these painted spirits, the people once sat in circle. Speaking of sky and silence, there are deeper caves in Landana Te Pahu, the cave of the drum, wide, vaulted, almost cathedral-like, once home to families, perhaps even a refuge for those hiding from raiders or storms. The air inside is still and cool, and light filters through from collapsed ceilings, painting the stone with shifting sky. In the heart of that silence, time unravels. Sit here in your imagination. Feel the moist air. Hear the slow drip of water onto stone. Smell the volcanic earth. Around you, silence expands, not empty, but full of listening. You are within the island now, held in its palm. In other caves, bones have been found. Human remains carefully placed. Offerings of shells. Fragments of the whispers of burial rites long forgotten. These are not signs of fear, but of veneration. To be placed within the earth was to return to origin, to become one with the land. There are caves no one speaks of, known only to elders. Their entrance is hidden by stone or plant. Sacred spaces where old gods were honored, where manna was passed. Some say chants still echo there, though no voice has spoken them in lifetimes. Even in modern times, the people remember. Some go to the caves, not for ritual, but to sit, to listen, to breathe, to feel what cannot be named. The caves do not speak in words. They speak in waiting. They are wombs of memory, cradles of the unspoken. And now, dreamer, you are there. In the dim light, the walls curve like ribs around you. You are still. Your breath is soft. The stone is warm beneath your hand. Close your eyes within the dream. Feel the cave rise around you like an ancient breath. Here memory is not lost. It is simply sleeping. And when the island is ready, it'll wait. Time moves differently on Rapa Nui. It does not rush or roar. It unfolds like the tide creeping up the black rock, like the wind curling through dry grass. like the stones slowly warming beneath the morning sun. And so, too, did its awakening begin, not in sudden light, but in soft flicker. For generations, the island had been cradled in quiet. Its people endured hardship, silence, and the long forgetting. The Moai stood toppled. The chants were whispers. The sacred was hidden beneath years of occupation, conversion, and sorrow. But the land never stopped listening. In the early 20th century, foreign archaeologists began to arrive not with swords or sails, but with notebooks and careful hands. Some came with curiosity, others with reverence. They walked among the fallen giants and began to raise them not to conquer, but to understand. At Ehu Tongariki, the massive stone platform by the ocean, 15 Moai once lay scattered by time and tsunami. Slowly, carefully, they were lifted again, not by chance or ropes this time, but by cranes and scaffolding. A different kind of devotion, a restoration. But not all awakenings are made of stone. On the island, something deeper began to stir. Among the elders, memories flickered. Among the young, questions bloomed. What did the chants sound like? What did the glyphs mean? Who were we before we were told to forget? The people of Rapa Nui, no longer just subjects of study, became the keepers once more. The old language, still spoken in parts, was preserved and taught. Songs returned to lips. Dances 2 feet. The Moai were no longer just relics, they were ancestors. Cultural revival began, not as revolution, but as return. Schools taught their Rapa Nui tongue. Elders told stories under the stars. The people stood before their statues, not in confusion, but in kinship. The Rongorongo tablets, though unreadable, became sacred once more, not for what they say, but for what they remind us. That knowledge can be forgotten, and still remembered again. In this slow awakening, the island became alive in a new way. Tourists came, yes. Planes arrived. Roads were built. But beneath the modern surface, the soul of Rapa Nui rerooted itself, not in nostalgia, but in quiet resilience. There are ceremonies now new, yet ancient, offerings of flower garlands, recitations in Rapa Nui, rituals honoring Make-Make, children walking in the footsteps of the birdman without risk, but with reverence. And they still stand, or lie, or huff emerge from grassy slopes. But now, people sit beside them again, not as puzzles to be solved, but as presences to be honored. The island does not long for the past. It remembers it. It weaves it gently into the present. This is not rebirth. It is a slow breathing, an inhale after centuries of silence. And you, dreamer, resting here in the hush of your own breath, are part of this awakening. Your listening is part of the remembering. The Moai have watched many awakenings. Now they watch yours. There are places in the world where the wind is just air, movement, whether a passing breath. And then there are places like Rapa Nui where the wind is something more. It is voice, it is story. It is the gentle carrier of things once spoken, long since silenced, and now returning like birds across the sea. The wind here does not howl. It wraps itself around the Moai and moves through their empty ice. It sighs across the crater rim of Rano Kau. It dances over the petroglyphs at It sweeps between the stones of Ahu Akivi, who face the rising sun and seem always to listen. This wind remembers. At twilight, when the heat fades and the shadows stretch across the land like fingers of night, the air stirs in patterns only the ancestors understand. It rustles the grass over buried Ahu. It brushes the shoulders of statues who no longer stand, and those who never fell. It slips through the crevices of the lava tubes, as though searching for names it once knew. It is said that, if you sit very still on the cliffs, or near the sacred lake, and breathe as slowly as the sea swells, you might hear it speak, not in words, but in rhythm. The same rhythm that once guided voyagers the same rhythm that pulsed in the drums before the walking. Moai, the same rhythm that beat in the hearts of carvers and chanters and dancers beneath Make-Make's gaze. In the wind, the past is not gone, it is airborne. And it carries more than memory, it carries longing. Not sorrowful, but gentle. A longing to be seen, to be felt, to be remembered not just in history, but in presence. Sometimes, when a visitor stands before a Moai for the first time, they feel it a pressure behind the ears, a flutter in the chest, a trembling of stillness. And they say, it feels like they're watching me. And perhaps they are, but more likely, it is the wind that watches, that leans in close, that wraps around your limbs and invites you, softly, to remember something older than your own name. The people of Rapa Nui have long listened to the wind. In their canoes, they read it like scripture. On their farms, they felt its touch as blessing or warning. In their rituals, they waited for the right moment, the sacred wind to carry their chants to the ancestors. Even now, children are taught to pause when the wind shifts, to turn toward it, to greet it, to ask it questions the elders no longer answer with words. You, too, can ask, not aloud, not in demand, but in stillness. Sit, dreamer, in your mind's garden. Feel the air move around you, not as breeze, but as memory. Ask nothing, expect nothing, simply be, and perhaps, like the Moai, you too will be seen, not for your thoughts, but but for your listening. The wind carries what we forget. And one day, when we are ready, it brings it back. Night comes gently to Rapa Nui. It does not descend, it unfolds. A veil drawn across the sea, a hush poured into every hollow, every grove, every breath of stone. The stars emerge not with brilliance, but with patience. One by one they pierce the sky like slow, ancient thoughts returning to the surface of the mind. The island becomes still, not asleep but aware. The Moai, those eternal watchers, remain in their places. But something changes when the sun dips beneath the horizon. Their presence deepens, the light no longer outlines their form, it fills their absence. They become silhouettes of memory, monuments not to the past, but to something beyond time, and over them settles the great silence. It is not emptiness, it is not lack, it is presence. It is the breath the island holds between stories, the pause between chants, the moment when even the wind lies down to listen. This silence is not passive. It watches. The Rapa Nui once believed that mana, the sacred energy of life, gathered strongest in places where the world became still. Sacred platforms, hidden caves, and especially in night. Not the darkness itself, but the space it opened. In this night's silence, the ancestors were said to walk, not as ghosts, not as shadows, but as intentions. They passed unseen, not to haunt, but to tend, to check upon the dreams of children, the direction of wind, the balance of breath and tide. Their presence was not frightening. It was a form of love, quiet, constant, unnamed. If you wander the island at night beneath the sky strewn with stars and the soft glint of the Milky Way, you may feel it. A weightless gravity, a sensation of being seen without gaze, of being known without history. You are not alone, but you are not followed. You are not judged, but you are measured. Even now, the elders speak of this watching. They say, at night, do not speak too loudly. Do not laugh too sharply. The silence listens. This is not Firetta's reverence, for when the modern world sleeps, the old world rises, the sea becomes more than water, the cliffs more than stone, the statues more than memory. They become part of a greater stillness, one that waits for no clock, obeys no map, answers no command. And within that stillness, your breath joins theirs. This is why Rapa Nui is called the navel of the world, not because it is the center of geography, but because it is the place where silence returns to source, where memory folds into dream, where the night watches and finds you watching back. So rest now, dreamer. Let the hush wrap around you like a woven mat. Let your thoughts drift like clouds across obsidian sky. You are not lost. You are exactly where the silence has been waiting. Before there were Moai, before there were chants etched in wood or wind, they came not by accident but by design on great double-hulled canoes carved from tree and dream. They crossed thousands of kilometers of open sea, guided by nothing more than starlight, the taste of salt on the breeze, and the pulse of ocean swells. They were Polynesians, navigators, wayfinders, whisperers of sky and wave. And one day, they found Rapa Nui. We do not know their names, but the island remembers their arrival. The land rose to meet them. The volcanoes stood to greet them. The waters of the crater lakes opened in reflection, as if recognizing a return rather than a discovery. They brought with them seeds, pigs, bananas, taro, chickens. They brought knowledge of fishing, farming, carving, and story. They brought mana not as magic, but as presence, and they built lives with reverence. But in time, they stayed. The sails were furled. The canoes became fewer. The island became home and horizon. And yet, the memory of voyaging never left. It lingered in chants, in the shape of paddles carved into stone, in the ceremonial races at Anakina where children still run with wooden oars. The ocean remained, not a barrier, but a field of potential, one that called and called, even as generations passed. Then, centuries later, the voyagers returned. Not those who first arrived, but their descendants. From across Polynesia, Hawaii, Tahiti, Aotearoa, Samoa, the Cook Islands they came, bearing tattoos, chants, and old songs in search of connection. Not conquest, not study, but kinship. They sailed again. In recent decades, traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe Wahab made the journey to Rapa Nui using ancient navigation methods. Nuje Pesi, only the stars, the wind, the clouds, and the sea. And in doing so, they completed the circle. They brought with them not answers but questions, not pride, but humility. What does it mean to come home to a place you've never been, but your ancestors once touched? On Rapa Nui, they were welcomed not as foreigners, but as family. Ceremonies were held, hands were joined, the Moai watched, and perhaps if stone remembers, then the statues saw their kin returning not in likeness, but in spirit. The rhythm of paddles returned to the island's pulse. Two voyages to remember that we are never truly still. Even on land, our souls move. They drift between questions, between breaths, between selves. You, too, are a voyager now, drifting not through water, but through time. You sail between chapters, carried not by wind, but by wonder. You seek not arrival, but and as the ancient sailors once navigated by stars, so you navigate by stillness, finding your way in the quiet between thoughts, the hush between heartbeats. Let us sail now, slowly, into the final hush of this story's tide. All things that live carry memory. The trees remember the rains. The stones remember the fire. The ocean remembers every canoe that dared to cross its breath. And Rapa Nui remembers you, not as a name, not as a visitor, but as presence. Because long before you listened, before you closed your eyes to drift into the hush of history, something in the island already felt you coming. It knew your breath. It welcomed your stillness. It folded its story around you like a cloak of sea-warmed air and starlight. This is the final gift of the island. It is not just a place of ancient things. It is a place that listens back. The Moai, carved with the faces of ancestors, do not simply stare. They reflect. When you look upon them in your mind, when you sit quietly and allow their gaze to settle into your thoughts, they offer not answers but clarity, not facts but depth. They do not ask for worship, they ask for pause. Because in this pause, something sacred stirs. You begin to feel that time is not a line, but a circle. That memory is not lost, it is sleeping in stone, in soil, in story. That what was carved by hand centuries ago is not far away but just beneath your skin. You begin to understand that history is not behind you, it is within you. The island has whispered to you through these chapters, in waves, in silence, in shadow. And now, as your breath grows even slower, your thoughts lighter, your body more still, the island does not say farewell, it simply says, remember me. Not with photographs, not with artifacts, but with stillness. When you watch the moon rise, remember. When you hear the wind pass through trees, remember. When you close your eyes and feel presence, remember. You are part of this island now, not physically, but soulfully. And as the Moai stand eternal beneath stars, so too shall this journey remain. Inside you, a place to return to when the world grows too loud, when the clocks tick too quickly, when you need a breath that belongs to no one else but the ancients. The statues will still be here. The cliffs will still remember your footsteps. The wind will still carry your quiet. You have not merely learned about Rapa Nui. You have walked its dream, and now it remembers you. Sleep well, dreamer. You have wandered through the sacred and returned more whole than when you began. Let us drift now into the final stillness. And now, dear dreamer, the story quiets. The tide withdraws from the shore. The stars above Rapa Nui blink more slowly, as if they too grow drowsy. The wind carries no more questions, only dark calm. You have walked beside stone ancestors. You have wandered through sacred silence. You have felt the breath of caves, the gaze of gods, the hush of forgotten chants. And though your body has not left its place, your soul has journeyed far over black volcanic soil, beneath painted cave ceilings, along the cliffs where birdmen once climbed, and into the dreaming hearts of statues who still remember the sky. You are no longer merely listening to history. You have become part of it. Tonight, as sleep takes you deeper, the Moai still stand, guarding not just the island but your rest. Their silence is your lullaby. Their watching is your shelter. Their memory is your own. If these ancient whispers have touched your breath, let your presence ripple gently through the world. With a like, a subscription, a small sign of belonging to this circle of those who dream through time. And should you ever feel adrift, return here, to the island in the dark, to the stone that speaks without sound, to the wind that remembers you. For this is not an ending. This is a resting place between journeys. Close your eyes now, let the last light fade, and sleep, surrounded by all that endured. We will meet again in another silence, in another time, in another dream. Good night from Rapa Nui. Good night from the dreaming historian.